I'd like to welcome everybody to the class today. This first class that I'm giving is going to be going over FPP as a player. For those who've been around the hobby for a little bit or even not, with xLights and doing the types of shows that we do, you need a show player. There are two primary show players that we use in to create these kind of shows. One is xSchedule, which is part of xLights, and that runs on your computer. Therefore, your computer becomes the player, and that ties up your computer for the duration of your showtime. So FPP is another option for player, and it is something else to learn. So a lot of people kind of steer away from it. So hopefully this class will help show how easy it can be to set up a player and give people that option if they want to use FPP as a player. During this class, we're going to kind of go through and just set up a basic installation in order to play our sequence shows. We'll kind of cover what do we actually need in order to create an FPP as a player. We're going to go over the imaging process. How do you actually get the software installed onto these things we call Raspberry Pis or BeagleBones? We'll go over the initial network setup and just kind of how to create a basic network that would be for your show. We'll talk a little bit about xLights integration and how to get your sequences and your configuration and all your settings from xLights into FPP. And then we'll go over to the FPP page and set up playlists and schedules. So that's going to be the gist of the milestones we plan to hit today for you. Obviously, if you do have any questions or anything, feel free to post in chat, and there'll be plenty of people in here that likely can answer your questions. Any unanswered questions at the end, we'll do our best to answer them in the time allotted. You might say, who is this guy, Ron Armstrong? Hey, that's me. And I'm from the Kansas City, Missouri area, very central to the country. I've been doing animated lighting myself since around 2018. So I don't know what's that, 5 years under the belt. Did some other interesting lighting projects before that time, just not what we know as LED synchronized shows. I've also been participating with the FPP as a QA team member for the last several years, so very involved in making sure that anything we find with difficulties in FPP get documented and accounted for and addressed. So I do a lot of the QA, got a whole lab set up around this. Also a founding member of the new Matos Designs M team. That's our new consulting services team. Through Matos Designs. We won't get into vendor specific stuff, but I do a lot of show support all over the world. And most of that comes through being an active Zoom room helper. I've been very involved in the xLights Zoom room for about 3 years now, and spend, somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 hours a year in there, helping people all over the world with their shows. Now, when I'm not doing all the lighting stuff that I do, and my family thinks I'm a little crazy, but who isn't in this hobby, right? My real day job that pays the bills, I'm an enterprise IT storage management consultant, work for a large enterprise storage company, and also data center architect is my background, all things data center. Quick fun fact that most of you probably don't know is I happen to also be an amateur radio operator, and I've got other hobbies as well that leverage amateur radio operations for several local charity events that I participate in each year. So a little bit about me. So I hear a lot about this FPP and I don't really know where to get started and what do I really need, right? So ultimately you're going to need a single board computer, is what they're called, which can be a Raspberry Pi or a BeagleBone Black or a Pocket Beagle. And there's various versions of Raspberry Pi. In the pictures here, you just kind of see what these things look like. So here on the right, this happens to be a Raspberry Pi 4. Down here at the bottom is a Raspberry Pi 0. Up the top, a BeagleBone Black, and this is a Pocket Beagle. So these are called single board computers. They are a full contained computer that runs some version of Linux. Now, FPP happens to have the operating system baked into that image, so it's all in one. You will need like a micro SD card. Which will be what we will install the FPP software and everything onto. And we strongly recommend at least an 8 gig size card. Of course, a 16 or 32 would be preferred. If you have a 64 gig SD card, that's perfectly fine. Most of the content that will be on your FPP as a player, all your sequences and your media file and all that, for most residential shows, a 16 or 32 gig size card is going to be more than enough for your shows. You also need like an SD card reader or some way to take that micro SD card to your computer so you can initially install the FPP software through what we call an imaging process that we'll go over. You'll need a power supply to be able to power the device. And I didn't mention earlier up here, but we kind of prefer Raspberry Pis for players. Raspberry Pis have more computing power than the BeagleBones and more geared towards the resources necessary to be a full player. BeagleBones, if that's what you have because of availability, that will be a player very well also. BeagleBones are better at driving pixels. And we won't get into the controller aspect of it, but Pis are fantastic for that. And they're becoming more and more available. I know there's been a worldwide shortage for the last couple of years, but they're becoming more and more available every day, you see. We need a power supply. I started talking about that to power your device. So like a Raspberry Pi 4 takes a USB-C power port. So you need an appropriate power supply to power your Raspberry Pi if you choose to use that. And some way to either a case or some sort of way to mounting bracket if you want to mount it inside your controller cabinet or whatnot. So not a whole lot that you need. Basically, you'll need effectively a Pi, an SD card, a way to get that SD card in your computer, a power supply, and then some way to mount it so it's just not flopping around loose, right? So not a lot that you need, but those are the main components. We talk a little bit about the imaging process. You can use a variety of different imaging software to burn the image onto the SD card. Lately, we've been kind of recommending the Raspberry Pi Imager, which can be downloaded anywhere from the internet. So just Google search for Raspberry Pi Imager, and then you'll be able to find the download page and install that software. The one reason I've shifted myself to using the Raspberry Pi Imager, of course, you can also use Balena Etcher. You can use, there's a .NET imaging software. And in the old days, we used to use Windows Disk Manager. I forget what that software is called, like Win32 Disk Imager is what it was called. But with the Raspberry Pi Imager, one of the advancements that's been made just this year is that the FPP images are actually selectable right from the imaging software. So you don't have to worry about going and manually downloading the image first, like with all the other software products that we use to burn cards. Actually give a, I wanted to give a little demo and just kind of show what that looks like as well. So I was going to launch that and bring that up. Apologize, I forgot I wanted to have that up and running, but. So with the latest images in the Raspberry Pi Imager are going to be part of the repository. And as of today, then that includes the 7.0 FPP for both Raspberry Pi and BeagleBone boards. You would choose in the menu system under Choose OS, you would go to Other Specific OS in the menu. Then you'd scroll down and you would find FPP in that list. And then you'll have the list of versions that you can choose to automatically download and install onto your card without having to know to go download it from GitHub first. Or if you already have the images, you can just choose Use Custom, and then that'll open a Windows browser that you can browse to the specific image. So just as an example, in the Raspberry Pi Imager, we would choose OS, scroll through this list down to where it shows Other Specific Purpose OS. Scroll down through this list, you will find FPP, and then you will find the versions available. So 7.0 for Pi, Raspberry Pi image, because the images are different, or 7.0 for BeagleBone. You can still download the 6.3, 6.2, and 6.1.1 images, but these are all for Raspberry Pis only. The BeagleBone older images are not currently in this repository that's available for automatic selection. So you would just, select your 7.0 Pi as an example, and then you would choose storage device, which I don't have any SD cards plugged in right now. So once you select the image, you would choose storage, select your card, and then this right would become available. You click right, and that's all you got to do. Click, click, boom. And there are several videos out on YouTube about using Raspberry Pi Imager also. If you have already downloaded the image, back to the beginning of this menu system, you can go down to choose custom, and that would open a select image or file browser for you to browse through the different images that are available, and you would select your image and do the same process. So very straightforward, pretty easy, trying to make it as easy as possible for everybody to be able to get to, the imaging process complete. So now I got this on a card. What do I do with it? Well, you would insert the card into your Raspberry Pi and you power it up. Once it powers up, you need to be able to connect to it for the first time and do your initial network setup. There are 3 primary methods that you can use to connect to your FPP instance for the first time. By far the easiest is just to connect the Ethernet cable from your Raspberry Pi to your home network, such as your home router, or if you happen to have a switch already, just connect it to your home Ethernet. It will automatically, dynamically get an IP address assigned from your home router. Then we could go into xLights, choose the tools FPP Connect utility that we'll talk about in a minute, and it will search and discover your device, and it will actually see that device on the network, and then you can just, it'll be a hyperlink that you can click, and that'll open the web page for the initial setup. If it doesn't get discovered in xLights, or you don't have xLights installed yet, which you should, you can also just open the browser and try to use the default name of fpp.local in your browser. Or you could log into your home router and look at the client list, or use an IP scanning utility such as the xScanner utility, which is part of xLights. So basically that process is just to, when you first plug it into your home network, you don't know what the IP address is yet. So that's just a way to discover what the IP address is. Let's say it's not convenient to be able to plug into your home network. That's by far the easiest method, right? But let's say that it's not that convenient to get it plugged into your home network. So as long as there's no Ethernet cable connected, after you power up your Pi, you have to wait 3 or 4 minutes, and it'll actually go into what we call tethering mode, or Wi-Fi tethering mode. Now, this method would require a Wi-Fi adapter that supports an access point mode, which not all of them do, but all of the built-in wireless adapters for Raspberry Pis, they do support that mode. Another reason why I typically recommend Raspberry Pis for a player, but the built-in wireless will always go into wireless mode. It will broadcast a Wi-Fi network named FPP. And so you can just connect to that, scan for new networks, just like you were traveling to a new location. Scan for new networks. You should see a network called FPP. The password would be, the default password would be Christmas with a capital C. And then once you get connected to that wireless network, you would be able to access your FPP device by opening your browser and just go into this address, the 192.168.8.1 address, and then you'll be connected to that FPP instance, and you can further configure it from there. So that's the second method on doing the initial connection, initial setup. The third method will be over USB tethering, where you would plug that device into USB. I will say that method is not supported on the standard full-size Pis. I use full-size in quotes because they're very small devices. But like the Pi 2B, the 3B, 3B plus, 4B, all those standard size Pis did not support the USB tethering method. However, like your Pi Zeros, your little mini Pis, and BeagleBone devices do support this method. So once you plug in the USB to your device, you should recognize the USB sounds if you're using Windows, or boop, 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 right? The USB sound like when you connect a device. And then after a moment, you should be able to access FPP using these addresses. And they're different because the way USB gets initiated is different between Windows and Mac. So in a Windows system, you would use the IP address 192.168.7.2, but on a Mac system, you do use 6.2. Now we'll mention that all of this setup is in the FPP manual. We'll show you the FPP manual here in just a moment. So if you do get confused, either A, refer back to this recording, or you can always go to the FPP manual, and it actually talks about all these setups as well. And once you're connected for that initial setup, we're going to be presented with a web page that is the initial setup page, and you will not be able to get past that without choosing some options for password options, right? There's two specific fields that we're going to show you here in a minute. One is called UI password. We recommend that to usually be disabled. That creates a user interface password. We usually recommend that to be disabled. And there's another option for the OS password, which we usually recommend to be set to default. You can certainly change that OS password if you prefer. Just, you need to remember it. So if there are problems with your instance, we may need to get in and use that operating system password. And if it's not the default, we won't know what it is. So you'll just have to make sure and remember what that is if you do set that. So once you get past that initial setup page that we're going to review in a minute, you're going to want to configure your networking. So if you're going to connect your Pi to your for your show using the Ethernet interface, then you would connect that. We typically recommend assigning a static IP address that's valid for your network. Or if you're going to use your Pi connected to Wi-Fi, you're going to want to supply your Wi-Fi credentials, such as your SSID or Wi-Fi network name, and your password for your Wi-Fi network, right? And I'm going to flip over to my browser here. This is one of the systems we're going to use in our setup here, just to show you what that initial setup page looks like for FPP 7. Earlier versions or later versions, it might look a little different, but today the current version is 7.0. I know they just released 7.1 like within the last day or so, but this page will still look the same. There's just some minor updates and improvements for 7.1. So once you first get connected to your Pi, you're going to have this initial setup page. Here's where we talked about you'll need to choose. Like right now, if I try to go to any other tab, go to any other menu system, you can see I never get past this page. This page is always here because you do have to choose an option for your UI password and for your OS password. So I'll go ahead and set those. This particular device is going to operate in remote mode. You can either be a player or a remote. We're actually really talking about player today. But this particular device is going to be a remote in my demo, and give it a unique name. In the event that you have multiple FPP devices, you do want to give it a unique host name. Now, this name has to be a legal network name, so no spaces or special characters. Excuse me. You will have share statistics. You click these little question marks, you get a little pop-up that talks about this. So this will be, do you want to share your anonymous statistics with the developers? Your choice is enabled or disabled. So if you don't want to share statistics, disabled. If you do, enabled. And then, you know, some other standard options here for what your locale, your time zone, and your latitude and longitude if you want. But once you make your initial setup changes, you just hit finish setup. And now that page is gone. And you'll notice a lot of times in FPP, when you make a change, you'll get a little banner up here. So a lot of times you'll make a change and it'll require you to restart FPPD or reboot. So pay attention to these yellow banners and take the appropriate action, like restart FPPD. That was that initial setup page. I am not intentionally watching chat right now, but if there are questions along the way or anything that needs to be brought to my attention, if the other moderators can just make sure and pipe in, you're welcome to pipe in.
Nothing at this point.
Thank you, Pat.
How about grow file system?
Correct. So we didn't talk about that. So when you first burn the image to your SD card, it is a small size for easy distribution. So it's going to be in the neighborhood of just under 4 gigabytes in size. So you won't have a lot of room. But correct. Once you first get through that initial setup page, you may have a big red banner up here at the top on the status page that will take you to have a link to go to storage settings. Once you end up in storage settings, you might have a button here to say grow file system, which just means allow the entire space available on your SD card to be used for FPP. So you would click that grow file system. Once that completes, which is very quick, then you do a reboot, and then your full size would be available. On this guy, I can see I've got 9 gig available, but I've got like 33% used. So I'm assuming this is like a 16 gig card. It's in the system. I'm not sure exactly which card's in this system, but this disk utilization, this was the help and about page. And this disk utilization will show you how full your SD card is. If this is all the way over here in the yellow or red zone, and it shows very little free space, either your card's full or you have not yet grown the file system. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. But that would be right on your status page, big red banner here on a new setup. That'll take a link straight to that storage tab to allow you to grow the file system. Yeah. So today what I've got set up is a standard in my one of my demo environments. Just as this is a standard basic network, right? So I've got my little Wi-Fi router that represents my home router. The xLights computer that we're using is wireless. Now, if you're here for the very beginning of the class, today I happen to be working remote. I'm about an hour away from the house. I'm actually working over a VPN from my xLights to my demo network. I have a network switch that my player over here on the left is the player that is Ethernet connected to my switch, which is Ethernet connected to my controller. In this case, I'm using a Dragon, Matos Designs Dragon controller with a couple of props. I also have that Pi we were just looking about is this little Pi Zero running a LED panel. This is a P10 panel, and this is wirelessly connected that will be operating in FPP remote mode. So I have a standard controller that the player will send data to, and I have an FPP-based controller that will be used with what we call multi-sync, which is the protocol used in FPP to communicate between a player and an FPP remote. This is just an example of the basic network setup I've got here for demo. And this is in the FPP manual would be what we refer to as a, the heck schedule. So here's the FPP manual. Apologize, I want to back up. How do you get to the manual, right? That would be an important question. If you go to the help menu from FPP, you can go to FPP manual right here from the help menu. And that'll take you to link to the currently available FPP manual version for the version FPP you're running. I will state that the 7 manual is not yet released, so that still takes you to the 6 manual, but you have the most things in here will still be relevant. Towards the end down here, there'll be a section. You go to the table of contents here. And down towards the end of the glossary, advanced options, network considerations. There's a whole section in here that talks about network considerations and different common network setup types. Specifically, what we're demoing in this class is what's called home network with a switch. And of course, I'm on the internet and this manual is not loading very fastly for me. So we'll just skip past that. But this is basically the gist of a home network with a switch. I've got a switch between my player and controllers. And that switch is then wire connected to my Wi-Fi adapter. So this is all just one flat network. For those with a keen eye, you'll notice in this slide, I'm talking about FPP 6.3 because I actually prepared this slide earlier. I'm actually running 7 now on these devices. I'm not running 6.3. So that's the gist of what we'll show here today. So let's get into xLights integration. How am I doing time? 11:24, doing good. So within xLights, I know this is first class of the day. So for those who are already familiar with xLights, this might be old news, but for anyone who may be new, in xLights, you're going to define your controllers. And over on the right-hand side of each controller, you're going to define all the correct settings for that particular controller model, whether you got a Falcon or a Culp or a Higgs-Pix, whatever controller. So you'll configure your controllers in xLights and you'll have all the correct settings for that particular controller. And then you want to be able to get everything uploaded to your Pi. We use a utility called FPP Connect. So under the tools menu in xLights, you'll go to FPP Connect and that'll launch the FPP Connect. It'll discovery. It'll find the FPP instances. And there'll be some option in this top section on configuring FPP. And in this bottom section, will show you all of your sequences in your show folder. So you can just click and choose sequences, and we're going to do this live in a minute. Click and choose the sequences, then hit upload down at the bottom here, and it'll automatically configure your FPP devices and upload those sequences all automatically for you. We're going to go through and talk about some of these options up here at the top, right? You can choose an FSEQ type, you can choose media models, UDP outputs. You have several options up here. The correct options for your show are going to be dependent upon what kind of controllers you use and dependent upon how you have your controllers configured and what devices you're using. So the options that we set for my demo environment here may not be the actual options that you use, but we'll talk about the variance options and kind of why you may choose one over the other. So going through this columns, we're going to go to the next slide and we'll kind of talk about some of these here real quick, and we'll be able to demonstrate or have text here on screen. So FPP Connect is going to be used in order to configure the FPP device as well as upload sequences, and that was not supposed to progress. Apologize for that. So for the FSEQ type, we typically recommend to leave it at the default. So for FPP devices, that's typically going to be V2 sparse Z standard, unless you have a specific requirement to change this. So V2 sparse means that that FSEQ will contain just the channel data necessary for that FPP device. And then Z standard means it's going to be a compressed file. So that's going to be a smaller file. So it's going to be a little bit quicker to transfer time and a little bit smaller disk space usage on your SD card. There are choices for like just V2, which would be the full FSEQ with all channel data for all controllers. And then you have like a V1 option too, which we recommend never using. Those file sizes are going to be really huge. So just don't use V1 anymore, but we typically recommend just leave it at the default that comes up unless you have a specific reason that you need to change it. The media check mark that's on that FPP Connect device, you only want to change that and click that media for your player device, because your player device is the one that's going to play the audio. So if you use an FPP as your player, you have to be able to output your audio from that FPP device instead of your computer. So that would go to your FM transmitter or to your speaker systems. But that media check mark means it's going to upload the audio files to that FPP device so it can play. You do not normally want to send media files to any remote FPP devices because they will not be playing the audio. The models option, there's a models drop-down menu that would take all your models as defined in xLights and upload them into FPP as well. And that allows you to do display testing within FPP. You can pick an individual model and you can do display testing from that model. My personal preference, and just a preference, is I normally do not put models on my FPP devices, and I'll do my model testing directly from xLights under the tools test menu in xLights. And I normally do all my direct model testing from there, but it's a choice. If you want to put models on there, that's fine. There's a column for UDP out, and that option is what's going to configure the network output on FPP to be able to send the show data to other actively defined controllers in xLights. So in a little demo here, I have that Matos Designs Dragon controller. So I will use that UDP out option here in a minute in order to configure FPP to output the show data to that Dragon controller. Moving to the right, and usually you only want that selected on the singular device because you're going to have one FPP device that's going to output that data to your other active controllers. And normally that's going to be your player, because as your player is playing, he's going to send the data to the controllers. On the far right, there's a check mark for pixel hat / cape. And if you check that check mark, if you have like a FPP based controller, like the Pi Zero we have in our demo here, that's outputting to a color light card for my P10 panels, or if you have like a Colt controller or a Wally's controller, they all run FPP. And if you check mark that, then when you do the FPP Connect, it will also upload the outputs to that controller as you have defined in like the xLights visualizer, right? So those are the options that we have available in FPP Connect. So let's just run over to my xLights. This is my show directory I have set up for FPP class. And my Dragon controller is configured at this IP address 30.154. It's defined as a vendor model, has auto layout, auto size. We're not getting into all these details today. Visualize, you can see it has a couple of models assigned to it. Now I have already done an upload output on it. Now I have a second controller. I'll back up a little bit. So purposely, when I was talking about UDP out, I talked about active controllers. You might ask, what's an active controller? Well, in xLights, you have an active setting and you have a choice, active, inactive, or xLights only. So depending on your controller model, it may need to be active. Dragon needs to be active. Falcons need to be active. Hingspix need to be active. But this test pi 0 we have referenced here for my LED panels, you see it's not denoted as xLights only because it's FPP and it's going to operate in FPP remote. So if this device is your FPP player or an FPP remote, and you're going to use the multi-sync protocol, then xLights only is the correct choice for that. So we just wanted to note how these controllers are set up. And we're going to go to Tools, FPP Connect, and it's going to do a discovery. And it successfully discovered my devices. One thing I'll note is you'll see main pi listed twice. This device actually has 2 IP addresses on it now. For those who are paying attention, this first one, that is actually my VPN adapter that's currently set up on that guy. On the left here, the check marks would denote which devices you want to send data to when you do an upload. So we are not going to send data directly to this interface. We only, if your device shows up twice because you have multiple interfaces, which is another network type that we're going to talk about in the advanced class, you'd only want to choose one, right? We're leaving them at V2 sparse. I am sending the media to the main pi, and my UDP out is set to all. The choice is either none, all, or proxied. We'll talk a little bit about proxied in the advanced class coming up after this one. So you set your settings up here appropriately, and UDP out all is what we want for this one, because remember, he's going to send the data to the Dragon. Then I have a few sequences down here, I have a few check marked, but before I upload, we're actually going to take a look at that pi just to show that there's nothing there. So this is now the main pi. If I go to Content Setup File Manager, we can see there are no sequences. Go to Audio, there are no audio. If I go look at Input Output Setup Channel Outputs, I can see that there's no E131 or DDP outputs defined. And if we look through here, there's no outputs defined at all for this guy, right? So he's just bare bones fresh, nothing uploaded to him yet. Content setup, no sequences, no audio, nothing. If we go to status control status page, which is where you'll spend most of your time to start shows and all, right here, you can see there's no playlists, no anything on this pi. So this pi is fresh as it can get. So from FPP upload, FPP Connect utility, the settings we've already talked about, I'm going to smash upload. For those with a keen eye, notice this upload page looks a little different. You can see it's simultaneously uploading to both my devices. So what's new in xLights 2023.13? And this year, there's been a lot of work on that FPP Connect utility to make it more efficient and reliable and make it more functional. I think I just lost one of my headset sides. Anyway, change that over. So the upload's complete now. There's no real indication that it completed other than that dialog box got finished up. So if I go back to the main pi now, do a page refresh, we now see that we have selectable, some sequences and some medias. If I go back to the content setup file manager, there's just kind of like Windows File Manager, shows you the files that exist. I can see these 2 sequences that just got uploaded today at 11:34. I'm Central Time, by the way. And you can see the audio files now there. And if we go to Input Output Setup Channel Outputs, you can see it has magically configured this channel output page because of that UDP out setting that we talked about. So now this guy is already configured to send channel data to the Dragon directly. Hopefully that makes sense. For another demo purpose, I happen to have a live camera feed. This is at my house, actually about an hour away. And this camera feed is obviously going over the internet and very delayed, right? But I'm going to go back to the status page. We're going to play this sequence and just make sure everything works, right? Let's hit play. The sequence should be playing. If I hit over to the camera feed, oh, look at that. I can see my P10 panel down here on the chair, and I can see my trees. So this is actually playing now live from this demo environment from that FPP instance. So we're 98% there, I would say, right? If I switch back here and stop playing, the camera, it should stop, and now it stopped, and there's nothing there. Was there a question or comment there? Yeah, I think somebody had an open mic for a moment. So back to the presentation. We have now done xLights. We've pushed the config. We've configured FPP. You know, we got it imaged. We got it network connected. We used xLights and all the settings in xLights to automatically configure it for us. Super easy. And for a basic setup, that's really it. The next part is creating playlists and schedules. Right, so playlist is just going to be a collection of sequences that you want to be able to play at any scheduled or triggered time, right? And you can have multiple playlists. Some people might do a playlist for Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and a different playlist with different songs for Tuesday, Thursday, or they might have a different playlist for weekends or special occasions, but you can create multiple playlists. And you can add different items into a playlist as well. So commonly we're going to use an item called sequence and media, right? That's what we're doing, is building sequences. But we can also add FPP commands, or like a pause, or some other items we can add into the playlist as well. So sometimes you might, you know, have 5 songs and take like a 4-minute or a 3-minute pause or an intermission. And then you'll have more items, and then you'll take another pause. Some people use that for traffic control to help keep people flowing and moving out. And a playlist has 3 sections, right? There's a lead in, a main playlist section, and a lead out. Any items in the lead in would basically play just one time only when the playlist first starts. Think of that as kind of like your show intro. You might have like a, hey, welcome to the show, I hope you enjoy your time, whatever you have for a sequence, for a lead in, kind of an intro. Then you'll have the main playlist section, which basically that playlist section will loop over and over again for the duration of your schedule. So if you schedule it to start at 7 p.m. and end at 10 p.m., then that main section of your playlist will just play over and over again for the duration of your schedule. Then you have a lead out section, which means when you're at the end of your schedule, any items that are in the lead out section will play just one time only at the end of the show. Thanks for coming by. Hope to see you tomorrow. Whatever you might have for a lead out, think of that as like a show outro. All right, so let's flip over to the FPP and we'll actually create that. So that's going to be under content setup, playlists. And we don't have any playlists scheduled at all here. So I'm going to create a new playlist. And we're just going to give it a name. That's how about we just call it Zoom class. I'm going to add that playlist. And that automatically gets me into editing the playlist where I can add items to the playlist. And here's where you have the lead in, main playlist, lead out section, right? So I'm going to add a sequence entry to add to this playlist. And sequence and media is kind of the default. So I have this blinding lights sequence I just uploaded, right? I can do an FPP command. I can do an image only. I can do a media only. I can do a pause. You can have one playlist call another playlist. There's some advanced things that you could do that we're not really going to talk in detail about today, but sequence and media is going to be the most common. So I've got blinding lights and I have this light of Christmas in this case. So I'm just going to go ahead and say add to add that item. You can see it add to the main playlist. We'll go ahead and add my other sequence that I've uploaded here, Light of Christmas, and say add. So now I have 2 items in my main playlist. You'll notice when you select an item, they become kind of blue. And on this far left side is what we call a handle. So you can grab that handle and you can move it. So you can change order around. Blinding lights on top, blinding lights on, well, excuse me, blinding lights on bottom, where I can take and slide this up into the lead in section. That's how you get things to be part of the lead in. If you had an intro sequence, you would put that in lead in. If you had an outro sequence, you would put that in lead out, right? Just going to put these back in the respective sections. And I'm going to put blinding lights on top because that's where I want it to be. Now, once you've created this playlist, don't forget to always hit save playlist to be able to save your work. I don't know how many times I go in here and add things and I go check it out and why is it not there? Because I forgot to hit save playlist. So don't forget to hit save playlist. When you're in the playlist editor, you can also copy the playlist, you can rename it, you can randomize it, which means this playlist will randomize this order and play them in a different order. Or you can delete the playlist if you want to delete it. This is the playlist name that we created, right? We have this little back button to the left that takes us back to the list of playlists. So I can have multiple playlists. And then of course, if I select that playlist, I get right back into the editor. That's kind of the gist of playlists, correct? So now I have my playlist, which is going to have multiple sequences or whatever I want to play. I'm going to create a schedule. All right, so you can also create multiple schedules. You know, very common, we see people create like a Sunday through Thursday schedule, maybe end at 10 p.m. and then create a Friday, Saturday schedule, maybe end at 11 p.m. So you have a little longer show time on the weekends. That's just an example. If you do have multiple schedules, whichever schedule, again, you can grab that handle and move your schedules. We'll show that in a minute. Actually, we're probably only going to create one single schedule. And you can, whichever schedule is higher in the order, that's going to be your priority. So if you have schedules that conflict with each other, the one on the top of the list is going to take priority. And in the schedule, you'll pick and choose start and end dates as well. There's an option to pick specific holidays, which is very useful for holidays that may not always be on the same date. Example, Thanksgiving is not always on November 26th, right? It might be November 24th, maybe November 23rd, who knows? So you can pick and choose an actual holiday date for a schedulable item. So then you can have a custom schedule or a custom playlist for a particular holiday. Now, when you schedule, you can either schedule an individual sequence, you can schedule a playlist, or you can actually schedule an FPP command. Then you can set the stop type for your schedule. And there's 3 stop types: a graceful stop, a graceful loop, and an immediate. So what a graceful stop says is it's going to end at the end of the current playing song. So if you just started a song that's 3 minutes long and it became 10 o'clock, your end time, it's going to complete that song. And so your show won't actually stop till like 10:03, right? Now, a graceful loop will finish that entire playlist. If you had 10 songs in a playlist and you happen to be on song number 2 when 10 o'clock, your end of schedule comes, it will continue to play through that entire iteration and get from song 2 all the way down to song 10. Then it will stop. So I might be 10:20 or 10:25, right? Now, an immediate stop means I'm going to stop at 10 o'clock no matter what's going on, which even if I'm in the middle of a song, it's going to be a very abrupt stop. The graceful stop is the most common that we see, and that's the default choice, which just means it'll end the show at the end of the current playing song, which might be a little bit after your time slot that you scheduled. FYI. There's a repeat option in the schedules. So repeat is used to repeat a schedule item, whether it's a playlist or whatever it is. It's used to repeat that every X time. So an example, you could have like a 21-minute playlist and set the repeat to every 30 minutes. Then it will play every 30 minutes, which will give you the effect of a 9-minute pause between repeats. So we have seen some people that would set repeat like for 5 minutes and they wonder why it never gets to their second song or their third song on their playlist. It just does the first song and the part of the second song over and over again. Well, because they had that repeat set for like 5 minutes, which was restarting the beginning of the playlist every 5 minutes, and it was never getting to the end of the playlist. So that repeat is basically start every X time, whatever you have chosen. So that can be convenient if you wanted to play a show, say at the top of the hour and the bottom of the hour, set it for 30 minutes. So it'll go off at 7 o'clock, 7:30, 8 o'clock, 8:30, etc. Let's go ahead and demo real quick, setting up a schedule. Again, under content setup, that's where our scheduler options are going to be. I don't have any schedules currently configured, but I'm going to go ahead and add a schedule. You pick a start date, end date. How days do you want to run? Individual days, every day? These are your Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday. Here's a Sunday through Thursday we talked about. So you can pick what you want, when you want this schedule to trigger. Your start time, you can pick and choose. I will point out that for start time, there's a dusk and dawn and a sunrise and sunset. These are going to be dependent upon the proper geographic location defined in FPP. So when you went to that initial setup, you had an option to choose your geographic area. To get back to that, in case you didn't set it, status control FPP settings, and I believe it's under system. You have your geographic location. If you are connected to the internet, you can just hit look up location and see those numbers just changed because I'm in a different location now. And I just set my geographic location and it will use that geographic location for computation of what is sunrise, sunset, dusk and dawn in your scheduler, right? If you choose to use those start times. Or you pick a particular time, right? So let's just pick this as like 7 o'clock p.m., right? Start time. And I can either schedule a playlist, an individual sequence, or a command. We're going to schedule a playlist. I've got the Zoom class playlist available. This is where you have different stop types that we talked about. I'm just going to go ahead and do the default graceful stop type. And we're going to end this at say 10 people, right? Then the repeat options, you can pick and choose how often you want to repeat, like we talked about. I'm just going to do immediate, which means that we'll just repeat immediately one after the other, and the playlist will have continuity. I'm going to hit save, so don't forget to hit save during the after you create your schedule. Because this is not scheduled during my current time, then it won't automatically play. But if as soon as I hit 7 p.m., it's going to automatically play this Zoom class playlist that we just created. I want to buzz back to the status control status page. Remember, this is where we do most of our work. In this drop down here, I can now see I've got the Zoom class playlist, or I can still pick and choose individual sequences to play. So the playlist will show you what the content of playlist is down here. Now at the top, because I have a scheduler running, I can see that the next item is going to play Saturday the 26th at 7 p.m. If I wanted to see all the upcoming events, I can hit preview, and this will show me when it's going to start and stop and start and stop and start and stop. This is very handy if you are configuring multiple schedules or you're doing some advanced scheduling. You can come into this preview and you can see exactly what it's expecting to do with starting and stopping on whatever days. Now note that this will only show like the next 2 weeks out. So if I were to set the start date to like December, then this won't show anything in the preview because the preview will only show like 2 weeks in advance. I'm going to run back to content setup scheduler. And in this case, I'm going to deactivate this schedule. I'm just going to uncheck it, then hit save. If I go back to status control status page, I can now show that there's nothing currently scheduled. It's fine with creating the schedule, but just in this demo, I want to deactivate that schedule. So you can activate or deactivate schedules as well.
Ron, 10-minute warning.
Thank you very much. And look at that. We are at the point now where I think we've covered all the basics, right? So we got FPP up and running. We configured it from xLights, used FPP Connect to push sequences and configurations. We actually played a show to make sure that, hey, it worked. We created playlists and created schedules. So I'm going to open the floor if there's any other questions that may not have been answered by the presentation yet.
There is a question that's in chat now that Rick did answer for somebody, but basically just touch on upgrade paths. what's the easiest way to go from 5.5, let's say, to the current 7?
Sure. So we're going to go to help and about to get to this help and about page. We're also going to show you a second way to get there. If you click the version up at the top for those are the Kenai, this particular one is currently running on a master branch version. I'm going to switch over to my other Pi, which is actually just running 7.0 production. Master branch is the development branch that's getting commits and updates on the very regular. So as a general rule for your live running show, my recommendation is not to be on the master branch because that may have changes. They're still undergoing other changes. So from a production, so you click the version up here, which also takes you to the same page, or you go to help and about, which takes you to the help about page. There are 2 upgrade options. You'll note here that your local Git version is what is the technical GitHub version for what you're currently running. The remote GitHub version is what's available. So you can see that these are different. And it shows that an update is available. So as long as I'm within the same current branch, like 7.0 or a 6 or 5, if I hit this upgrade button here, it upgrades the FPP software. Does not do any operating system updates. So the typical, like through the showtime, you're just going to hit this green upgrade button and it's going to go start through the upgrade process and you're done. Now, if you're say that you had something up running last year that's on 5.5 still, or 6.3 or 6.2 or whatever, you're going to want to choose this upgrade OS option. So in my opinion, it's a little bit of a misnomer. You're going to choose this drop down and you're going to see all the versions that are available. So the upgrade OS is really operating system and FPP software all bundled together as one package, just like the initial image that we used to create the card. So you would choose, if you're going between branches, like from 5 or 6 coming up to 7, you would choose an OS version, select your option here, like 7.0, 2307 FPP OS. You can see this one does not say download because it's already been downloaded, because like I mentioned in the beginning, this Pi was 6.3 as of a week ago when I upgraded it to 7, like, well, probably a week or week and a half ago. One caveat when doing the upgrade OS option, if you're on any version of 5, it's going to be highly recommended to do the green upgrade button, and you might have to do it multiple times, but you're going to need to be on FPP version, the most current FPP version. So you end up on 5.5-27, I think is the current 5.5 version. There is a problem in the earlier versions of 5 that may cause these upgrade OS options not to complete 100% successfully. Basically, it's a 2-part. There's part 1, part 2, and part 2 probably won't run properly unless you're on the most current version of 5. So let's say you're on 5.3 as an example from a couple of years ago. Then you do the green upgrade button. That'll go through an upgrade process once. You'll come back, you'll have a banner that'll say 5.5 is available. Do you want to upgrade? You'll say yes. Then that will get you to the most current version of 5.5. Make sure you're like 5.5 dash, as long as you're 5.5-25 and newer, so like 27, I'm pretty sure is the current patch level. Then now that's complete successfully. Now you can go to upgrade OS and you can go straight to 7. You do not need to go from 5.5 to 6 and then to 7. Once you're on the most current version of 5.5, you can go straight to 7. Or if you personally feel that 7 is, you're not ready for the newest, latest, greatest version, which that's our recommendation is to always be on the latest. You can still choose 6.3 as well. If you do this 6.3 FPP OS update, that's going to give you the base 6.3, but there are patches that have been applied to that. So if you do 6.3, then you're going to want to do this green upgrade button a second time in order to get the most current version of 6.3, which is like, as of today, like 6.3.2, because there are patches that come on throughout the year, right? Hopefully I've covered that in reasonable enough detail, right, Pat?
Yep, 5-minute warning.
Cool. Any other immediate things in chat? I can see the chat now. I'll flip over there. So large shows don't, yeah, you don't really need. Well, in the advanced class, we're gonna go over a little bit about separate show network. There's rarely a real need to do a separate show network, but I know there is a class that is being later in this session, not in this room, in another room, that'll go over so you want to show network, I think is what that one's called too. I don't know his content, but yeah, so just browsing through chat, looks like several people have already been answering, so I'm assuming everything in chat's been answered. Does that sound right, Pat?
I believe it is. I think we should wrap and give
Yeah.
everybody a couple minutes to
Yeah.
regroup, bio break, and then get ready.
Yeah.
4 minutes.
Take a little break. I'm going to make some network changes as I get ready for my advanced class, but certainly keep the chat rolling. I'll still be in the room here and listening. I'm going to stop sharing while I switch some things around network wise.